another episode of The Single Girl's Guide to Life, your weekly guide to navigating single life in your 20s, 30s and 40s. And I am Chantelle, a single life confidence coach, helping you to stop worrying about finding a relationship and to just enjoy your single life. And if a relationship comes along, so be it, but it's got to work with the life you've already got, not just become the only life that you have. And on today's episode, I really want to address this idea around what it means to be single. Now, the reason that I started to think about this was because we were reading this book, Single on Purpose by John Kim, for our Single Girls Book Club. And if you want to get involved with that, then head to the link in the description where you can join the Single Girls Club online. We do a monthly book club every month and we go through a book. Sometimes it's very single related, otherwise it's female empowerment or personal development. This one happened to be this bright yellow book of Single on Purpose, and it's hitting the nail on the head in lots of different ways, because within page 7, which is what inspired this podcast episode, was the statement from Kim that we don't know how to be single. We don't know what it means to be single, what the narrative around it is, and how to be single. And so I looked up what the dictionary definition of being single or single, and officially it means that you are unmarried. And that's interesting because when you look at research and you're looking at things to do with singles and those that are married, there's this whole missing section of those that are in relationships, but they technically count as single because they're unmarried. So there's a distinct bit there. I think another definition I saw that I think was more useful was without romantic partnership. I think that was interesting. But in other senses, it just said that we were alone. And in terms of what John Kim goes on to talk about in the book, is that it means being okay with being with yourself. And I think that ties into this idea of being alone. Being single means being alone, means being independent, and by definition or explanation rather of that, being okay with being with yourself. I think there's this element around being okay with being single forever that really encompasses this idea of being single and being single and happy, because once you can get to a state where you don't care, that you really don't care what happens, you would be disappointed. You would be a little bit disheartened that you didn't have the chance to have the family life maybe that you picture. But the acceptance of, but I can't control it, I think is another element to developing that happiness or being content with being single and not living in fear, panic, worry and stress about trying to control an outcome that we can have some influence over, but not a full handling of at every given moment. That we are succumb to life, and there's another person involved in a lot of that, in all of that. So it's not something that we can individually just make happen without somebody else being a part of that in general. And it was interesting too, because I asked my audience, and that idea of loneliness came up as something about being single. And I think it's really important to talk about the difference between being alone and loneliness, because they are two different things. Being alone means being independent and not having the presence of other people around you. Loneliness is a feeling, and it is a lack of a sense of belonging. It means that you do not feel that you have the love, the network, the support, and the belonging in your life. And I don't believe that single life means that you are lonely. I've gone into this in many podcast episodes before. I'm not going to start a spiel on loneliness. I would suggest that you head to, let me reference it, episodes 6, 45 and 56, thank goodness I numbered them, that talk about loneliness a bit more directly. Loneliness is a lack of belonging and a lack of love in some way, and it's why we think that relationships are going to solve it. But it's different to being single and being alone, because you can feel lonely in your relationship. So being single can't mean being lonely, but it might be the experience that you're having in your single life, and it might highlight that lack of belonging in that scenario. In terms of being single and being alone, that's really what being single is about. It's being independent of any significant person in your life, and that you are solely responsible for yourself. And I'm going to delve into some kind of deeper areas of what I think it means to be single and how you can encompass that in your life a little bit more as you roll through, and some questions for reflection to kind of think about there. So there's an active practical element to this that will help you to hopefully start to feel like you can fend for yourself, that you are okay individually, that you're strong enough individually, and that in your unpartnered status, it's okay to spend time with yourself, as John Kim says. And these are the kind of things that we talk about in the club. I put prompts in every week, once a week, to get people to think about the book. So even if you don't quite read all of the book, you kind of know where we're probably heading with the conversations, and you can be doing the personal development work alongside it. And then for anyone that's there and around, even if they've not read the book, we talk about the themes of the book. So these are the impressions that I've got, not just from the book that I've read, because I've obviously gone through that, but I've also read many other books that were part of our previous book clubs, or just in general. I love reading, I love podcasts, so I have a very clear opinion on single life. But to me, and what I notice, is that being single means being free. Now, I often deliver this as the idea of being able to do what you want when you want. And I really lived that out this morning when I woke up very early. I don't really know why. I just couldn't get back to sleep. Nothing particularly playing on my mind. I normally would assess something like that, but just wasn't able to sleep again. So at 4:30 this morning, I got up, wrapped the duvet around me, and straightened my hair, ready ahead of podcast recording today. But if you were in a relationship, it's not quite as easy to do that. And I just mean you have no sense of having to consider anybody else. And then I went back to bed at 7:15 and I woke up at 9:15. So I made up for some of the lost time of sleep. It's just the sense that you don't have to check with anyone else. You have less obligations to fulfill that you would with a partner in the basic sense, but also just, tiptoeing around them literally when you wake up in the middle of the night. And don't get me wrong, that compromise can be nice to experience when you are in a relationship. It's the bit we might feel that we miss out on. But it doesn't just mean getting up in the middle of the night. If I want to leave the dishes out, then I do. But also, if I want to go out on a Saturday night, there's no one to tell me no. There's no one to say that you can't do that. And there's no one to stop you. You might have some circumstances that stop you, such as financial pressures, where you live, and therefore you're bound by some of the rules that have been set there. But otherwise, being single means having freedom of choice. It means having freedom of more time and of more energy. A relationship takes up an awful amount of time, and we are usually fairly confident and happy to sacrifice that time, don't get me wrong. But there will be times where it is a lot, especially when you at some point move in with someone and they're now there all the time. Where is my alone time? You will be asking for alone time one day when you're in a relationship, living together, maybe even with kids, and you're like, where is my me time? Oh my God, when I was single, I had excess of it and couldn't deal with it, and now I don't get any of it. I just want some of it back, and it's all about balance. But even before you get to that level in a relationship, you're putting the time in to maintain it daily when you don't live together. You're putting the time into planning events. And then it's the energy of it, right? Relationships bring up triggers in us, the things that we aren't very good at, the things that we're not comfortable with, our insecurities. It's something that I think is really important that within single life we do start to explore, because sometimes we might decide to stay single for extended periods of time because we're so fearful of what might happen. If it is too stressful, then so be it. But I would want to still explore that, even with a therapist. But they are energy consuming, and it can be absolutely worth it, don't get me wrong, but it is tough, especially if you've got things under there that need a little bit of work. And so when you're single, yes, you have to work on relationships in terms of friendships and family, but not quite at the same intensity that a romantic partnership is, which has a lot of different elements to it, and it is more intense and it is more consuming, and that's okay. But let's appreciate the fact that being single means you don't have to deal with that so much, and certainly not to that intense level. Dating, pain in the butt, that's a drain, but we do it because we're trying to get to that outcome. Sometimes it is great in single life just to take a break from dating. It's not very easy to just take a break from your relationship, not a long-term one, but you can just take a break from dating when you're like, I've had enough, let me stay off it for 3 to 6 months, especially during cuffing season. If you don't know what it is, go back to last week's episode, if I've sequenced this correctly, and have a little listen. And it lastly means that you don't have anyone's influence at all. That's what really being single and stepping into yourself means. You aren't feeling obliged to go and do things because you should, because you have to, because you want to support your partner. Like, as much as they're all well-intended, and sometimes they're not that well-intended because you do just feel you've got to do it because, and you roll your eyes and go, okay, I'll come to that event with you because you haven't got anyone to go with. But you're free of that. And that is what coupled up people look at single life and are jealous about. They do. Don't tell me they don't. Don't tell me they don't, because there is a day where they do. Oh, I just wish I didn't have to check in. Oh, I just wish I could come home and no one was there for an extended period of time. I just wish I could go out and do whatever I wanted and not have to think how it's going to affect our relationship or what's going on the next day. And especially once the kids are in, like, that's it. That free time's gone. Comparably. I know that some people do really make an effort to make sure they've got their time, and apologies there if you're a single parent too, because I realise some of you listen to this podcast episode, that's even harder for you. So some of your freedom is slightly limited because of practical elements, and comes back to everyone's got these different things. But generally speaking, you're not answering to another adult and what they want too much. Yes, you've got to balance the child between two homes maybe if you're in that position, but ultimately your life is yours and you aren't having to check in with somebody else about what you're doing in it too much. So if you want to explore that bit in your life, then ask yourself a couple of these questions. How do I spend my time? Do I live my life the way I want to? And what things can I do now that I couldn't so easily do if I was coupled up, e.g. without having to check in with a partner? Journaling is one of those powerful things. I suggest that you sit and journal on those, but you can just think about them. So hit rewind a couple of times to go back a few seconds if you missed them. Otherwise, we'll head on to the next element of what it means to really be single. So the next one is that being single means putting yourself first. Now, this is the part where single people can sometimes be kind of demonized because we're selfish. We're told that we put ourselves first too much, and like, why would we not sacrifice our life to have children? Because I don't want to, for example. That's so selfish of you. Okay. At the end of the day, your wants and needs are the most important thing. Bar the fact that we do want to make and maintain friendships and connections to other people. So sometimes we have to have that consideration. But comparably to when you're in a couple, it comes back to the kind of freedom element, but you are putting someone's wants and needs almost like to some degree equatable to yours, because that's where compromise is absolutely necessary in a relationship. You're never going to always get your own way. You can't have everything you're after all of the time, and you are going to need to at times compromise and go, I just can't get that because we want two slightly different things and we're going to have to compromise here to make it work. When you're single and you're putting yourself first, you're learning what it is that allows you to put yourself first, to make sure you're the most important thing and to stand up for yourself and your right to those wants, needs and desires in every aspect of your life, not just in relationships. And it's very possible that you aren't able to do that if you don't know yourself. And so being single means confidently knowing who you are, what you stand for, and everything that you want to happen in your life. And it doesn't have to be a clear vision. Do not paint this perfect picture that you're just trying to reach, because it's really, really hard. Instead, it's looking at experiences that you would like to have, but really, what is it behind that? So when I talk about the idea of not wanting children, it doesn't mean that I don't want a sense of family and belonging. But do I really, really want pregnancy and childbirth and child raising full-time, 24/7, like a mum? I'm not sure I do. But why do I still get jealous when other people say they're pregnant and announce their pregnancy? Because it's not that bit, it's not the practicality, it's what it means. So there's something underneath that. I know myself that well enough that I know I don't want children. I don't want to give birth. I could happily raise children. Would I want to do it 24/7 full time? Not sure I do. Not yet anyway. Happy to change my mind. But I do want a sense of building something together with someone. And that's a clear distinction. I can tune into the differences there because I've done 3 years of work on it. And it's the kind of thing that I help people do, even just to start it off in the Kickstarter sessions, but obviously with longer term programs, go even deeper with. Single life is for working this stuff out. And you have to know what you value most. The values exercise that I have, it's my favourite thing to do. I've got 4 really clear values and it literally feeds into my life. Sometimes I don't even think about them and I'm like, oh, this is why this is happening because this is so important to me. Or this is why this conflict is happening because this is so important to me. A lot of my friction in my life comes from an element of when my autonomy, my own choice about what I do in my life is being questioned. And it comes back to that freedom of single life, that I'm being told that I have to do something and I don't have a choice about it. And I'm like, but I do and I will. And unfortunately, I'm going to upset a couple of people about that. It's not my responsibility. Maybe I do need to consider it if they're people that I want to maintain a friendship with. But I am able to stand up for myself because I know what I believe in and I know what's important to me. And I'm not afraid to, unfortunately, ruffle a few feathers doing that by saying I don't want to. I know I'm not going to enjoy that. I'm not going to bring the energy to it that I want to. You have to develop this sense of self, this strength, and you build that thick skin because people are always going to come back at you when you don't do what they wanted you to do. You're learning to communicate and you're being a little bit brutal with communicating that, with the way that you have to go about yourself to protect yourself because you're the only one looking after yourself there. Yes, maybe you have loving parents that do look after you too and great friends. But they aren't there all the time. You have to be the one that stops yourself getting into situations that you don't want to be in. No one else is going to step in and do it for you. And this is what we mean when we talk about being okay with ourselves, but being independent. You show yourself that you can rely on you to sort your own life out. Okay, with a little bit of help and guidance along the way. But particularly so in a dating scenario, it's so easy to compromise yourself in dating, to let things slide because, oh, maybe they're the one, they've shown me a bit of attention. No. Sometimes we have to be a little bit harsh. And even when I've sometimes doubted some of my harshness and standing up for myself, it's usually ended up not that well. In actual fact, the more assertive I have been in dating, the more successful I have been. We can talk about the definition of success later, but I would say I've wasted less time the more assertive I've been about what I want and need. Because it's ended things a lot quicker. People go, oh, it's ended, it's unsuccessful. No, it ended because it wasn't serving me in the way that I needed. And I didn't waste time. And maybe I could have done with that earlier on in my long-term relationship. But it happened the way it happened. We're over that. So, standing up for yourself and knowing yourself means you've got to spend some time exploring what the world means to you. What do you care about? Some people highly value family. That's not as much of a value for me. You're each going to have your own individual things of what's most important, but you have got to work out who you are, what you stand for, and then you've got to be able to live that. And that involves breaking down some impressions people have of you, especially those that have known you the longest. Your family will find this shift in you, if you go through one, the most difficult because you're now not fitting in the box that they had for you and you're changing. They will get over it with time, some quicker than others, some more accepting and open than others. But you are going to have to put yourself out there and learn to rely on yourself. So the questions that can help you for that are, when was the last time you put yourself first? When was the last time you didn't put yourself first, but you should have? And you can know that you regret and can see what could have happened. And what do I need to stand up for myself more in? They're those 3 questions for exploring this idea of putting yourself first, which means standing up for yourself, knowing yourself, and knowing what you want out of life. And as I briefly mentioned earlier and touched upon, the last point that I think is really important about being single, being alone, is that you are okay with being alone forever. And I know that that might feel really scary. In fact, if you aren't okay with this concept, then I'm afraid that you might be living your single life in a state of fear right now. And that's okay. You're not there yet. A little bit of growth mindset work there. Not there yet. You will be at some point if you work on it. You believe that you can get to that point. And it is hard because people talk to you about dating. You just roll your eyes and go, I can't make things like that happen. But it's being able to stand up for yourself, going back to number 2, in those moments to be confident about knowing that your life is great and that you're living your life with the important things in it, even without being in a relationship. So if young children really do matter to you, and I know that some of you will be like, I just want a family. But if the ideas around it is it child raising, then consider moving industries into childcare and nursing or anything that involves young babies and young children. Will that fulfill you enough? Or is it because you want to build something with someone? But then you've got to work out how you're going to be without being able to build a life with someone. Could you build a project with someone? I cannot tell you what to do here, because so many of you have slightly different nuances to what it is behind what you really want. And if family life is so important, then embrace the family life that you do have access to. I would imagine that if you love the idea of family life, chances are you have a strong sense of family at home. Not always, because sometimes it's the fact that you don't that makes you want it. Find a family to involve yourself with. And I don't mean in a creepy way. I mean, like if your friend has a baby, really involve yourself in that and literally say to them, be honest about how you feel and what you want to be able to help with, but in turn benefit from as well. From close friends I'm talking here, not just friends that you go, oh, you've just had a baby, can I help? Bit random. Don't want to do that. But if you're living single life in a state of fear of the things that won't happen, then you're not living your single life right now. You're not staying in the present. And we hear about all this presence work, meditation, bring me back to the moment. That's no good if you can't actually do that when you're not meditating. The meditation part is the skill of clearing your mind and being able to stay in with the now and not get distracted by the thoughts. That's cool, but you have to be able to at least adopt some of that within your daily life. And it's weird because we also, particularly as a coach, are looking forwards at what we want, but we have to kind of let go that outcome may need to change, or the route to that outcome doesn't look like one particular thing. Yes, you might break it down into steps that you think are going to happen to allow you to move through the next stages, but you do have to realise it's not going to be a nice straight line. It's going to be a very squiggly line that goes up and down at certain points, and it might even end up slightly like different to where you thought it would. The idea of letting go of what you really, really want to happen as a singular outcome and being open and free to what could happen is better. And I know it's scary, especially with dating, because you get all excited, you think it's going to go a particular way, but you have to be ready to negotiate and to accept that things don't last forever, that you don't know how long something's going to last when it's sat in front of you. Being single means being okay with being alone forever. Very unlikely that you will if it's something that you're actively looking to do. Chances are you will at least have some short to mid-term relationships, and that means that you weren't alone forever anyway. But it means that accepting that if that does happen that way, you're not going to hold back on your life and sit and dwell on it, and that you're going to be okay to live life on your own. I think that's where Kim is really delving into there, being okay with being with yourself, being okay with living life on your own if that's the way it is, and doing enough to make sure that it's not entirely on your own. I think it's important. I'm not saying that you have to live in isolation, but I live alone, and I do question, like, how far do I want to live with another person? Do I want to do a Helena Bonham Carter, Tim Burton style relationship where they had two separate houses? I've always been keen on that, like, concept of the idea of different spaces. And then where's the integration? So do I need to live with someone that I'm with? I don't know. I also researched recently that libido drops for a woman when you live with your partner. Maybe there's good reason not to. I wonder if there is strength and opportunity in that. But that doesn't mean that if you weren't living together that you weren't building something with another person. But it's about questioning everything of what you really want and not just taking the script that someone's given you. So if you want to explore that area, I suggest that you reflect on these 3 questions. Am I okay with the idea of being alone? What aspect of being alone do I find uncomfortable? And how can I make my life as fulfilling as possible even if I'm alone forever? Your life is for living right now, regardless of your relationship status. And that goes for in a relationship as well. But your attention is so distracted because it's being affected by so many random hormones. You are free of a drug, essentially. The hormones that come about when love and funny feelings come along is addictive. And they are skewing the way you see things. And it's real hard to keep yourself grounded during that. However, right now, being single, once you're past the healing part, because I don't know what hormones are about during a breakup. I've never looked at that. But obviously we know there's that pull towards an ex. Once you're just out of the woods of that bit, you can acknowledge that you are hopefully just at this state of actually being, of not hopefully remedying yourself with distractions such as relationships, but also, alcohol and other things that keep us busy, a busy social life, or work, burnout. That kept me busy and distracted. That was kind of mine. So I didn't go down your most damaging kind of distractions, but there were distractions. Instead, strip it all back and go, what do I want my life to look like, even if I'm never with anyone else ever again? We are, in fact, having the discussion on this book this weekend if you are listening on the day of release, which is the 3rd of November. We're discussing this on the 6th of November 2022. And if you do listen to this after and you've missed that discussion, you can still join us for the next one. We will be reading another book that gets us through November, and that we'll be reading at the start of December, and so on. This is ongoing. It's for empowerment. It's for single life. It's for acknowledging all the frustrations we have. It's for general personal development as well. We end the year always with a habit book to make sure that we're setting ourselves up for January, for example. So if you want to join in with this month's book club chat, then head to the link in bio. Otherwise, we also have loads of community discussions and Zooms, and it just helps you feel like you're not the only single person in your group. Until next time, everybody, keep celebrating single life together.